Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic 2 check. Mic 2. Mic 3 check. Mic 4 check. Mic 5 check. Mic 6 check. Mic 7 check. Mic 8 check. Mic 9 check. Mic 10 check. Mic 12 check. Staff mic 1 check. Staff mic 2 check. Podium mic check. ADA mic check.
We'll see in closed session. There we go. All right, we reconvene back into public session at 1:05. Is there any member of the public who would like to provide any public comment on any of the closed session items that we just had? Again, I'll ask any member of the public to speak on any of the closed session items. Hearing and seeing none. Is there any member of the public who'd like to make any comments on any item not on the agenda? Again, I'll ask any member of the public who speak on any item not on the agenda.
No hands raised.
All right, we'll now move on to presentations. Presentation on the Vegetation Management Plan, VMP, on agency lands around Nacimiento Reservoir. Our presenter will be CAL FIRE Fuels Battalion Chief Luke Bjorgault.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Did I miss that one? Ah, son of a gun.
And then I need to report out, which I'll just do right now. There are no reportable items from closed session.
Thank you so much. All right, yes, please. And John, will you lead us in the
Thank
Pledge
you.
of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ah, thank you for reminding me. Dang. All right, now we'll do our presentation. Do we have a member present?
Yes, Chair, they are via Zoom.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Luke Bergo. I'm the Fuels Battalion Chief for CAL FIRE in the San Luis Obispo area. And with me, I've got our forester, Dave Erickson.
Hi there. How are you?
Doing well, Dave.
Good, good.
And we just wanted to give you guys a quick update on our West Nacimiento project and also a proposed project in the Heritage Ranch area. So looking at the West Nacimiento project, just want to confirm you guys can see our screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. So the red hash mark area on the map in the blue section, that's going to be your land in the West Nacimiento project. And then the red hash mark in the yellow is going to be the Heritage project.
And the area in blue is currently under plan and work has been conducted in that area under our West Nacimiento VMP. The yellow area is a planned project that we'll be discussing today called the Heritage VMP.
So updates on West Nacimiento, the turquoise area, that's the Allen burn unit. That was a burn unit that we completed a couple of years ago. So that's a past treatment. What that did was improve rangelands and reduce some of the older vegetation that was in that area. It's adjacent, but outside of the chimney fire burn scar. So good strategic location for use of prescribed fire. The other shaded areas are proposed use of prescribed fire for broadcast burning. We're also looking at maintaining a shaded fuel break and a proposed truck trail with some grading and 100-foot vegetation management work on each side.
So this is just a little bit about the Allen burn unit. It was 236 acres conducted in the fall of 2022. To prep the site, we used equipment such as a masticator and a dozer to create control lines. We conducted a broadcast burn, but also to prep the site, we conducted windrow and pile burning as well.
So for the fuel break, we're calling it the Gage Irving fuel break. We used a single blade dozer line, used chainsaws and hand crews to create burn piles. And we've been burning those piles along there. The proposed burn units are 57, 9, and 29.6 acres. And those are all going to be using a combination of hand line and different mechanical means. Also a crushing drum pulled behind a dozer and some broadcast burning.
So this is an example. It's a video that's going to show the use of a bulldozer with our crushing implement on it. And what that does, it runs over heavy fuel loaded areas with very tall vegetation, and it allows us the opportunity to create different age classes of vegetation. And it also lays down the vegetation to dry out to burn later in the year. And that provides us the opportunity of a much longer burn window during the year.
On the south end of the West Nacimiento project, there's a identified ridge line on the map that we're proposing shaded fuel break and some hand crew and dozer line work. There's also a proposed line for holding for the 53 acre, what we call a secondary line or contingency line for the 53 acre burn unit. And there's also a drainage inside the chimney burn area that we'd be looking at doing shaded fuel break and some hand crew work in to make burn piles.
So in the central area of the West Nacimiento VMP, we're looking at doing 100-foot shaded fuel break alongside the road that would include hand crew work of limbing and bucking, chipping, and creation of burn piles. We'd also be looking to broadcast burn approximately 14 acres using hand crews, dozer crushing to prep for a prescribed broadcast burn.
Identified on the map, there's a white hash mark line that would show a proposed truck trail that we would like to open up for firefighter access and egress and do 100-foot on each side treatment shaded fuel break.
And this truck trail would allow us emergency ingress and egress to wildland fires in the area, and also prep the site to burn off to help control wildland fires should we need to. This is the new project. It's currently in the planning phase called the Heritage Ranch VMP, and your area is hashed in red. In this area, we have a couple different treatments proposed, including 98 acres of roadside treatments, 29 acres of vegetation management, which could be anything from prescribed burn to pile burning to hand crew work to any implementation. And that's going to be around structures. And then 56 acres of road maintenance and shaded fuel break along the blue lines.
So part of the road maintenance for this project, we're calling it the Heritage Fire Road. It's a 2-track road that you guys currently maintain. And we'd like to do 100-foot treatment off of each side, bucking, limbing, chipping, burning piles, crushing if there's the opportunity, and some broadcast burning to extend the width of that defense buffer for starts on the lakeshore.
Any questions?
Well, thank you for the presentation. Let me ask board members, any questions or comments? Is there any member of the public has any questions or comments on this item? Yes, go ahead.
What's the time frame? When do you plan on starting?
Yeah, so the West Nacimiento project is currently underway. In other areas, we have various landowners in that region, and so we're currently working on their property. We would begin work on the West Nacimiento portion soon after we receive permission from your agency to conduct and continue work in that area. So we'd be looking in this summer, beginning some of that work. The Heritage VMP, however, would probably not begin until the middle of next year at the earliest. We're currently in the planning phase, which includes contacting all of the landowners, having discussions, doing field site visits to validate desktop reviews, and conduct our environmental due diligence through the CEQA process. And so that would take pretty easily until the middle of next year to begin implementation.
Is there any financial issues? Are we paying for anything or not?
No, CAL FIRE pays for these projects through the use of our crews and equipment to conduct the work and then carry out the burning using our resources.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Through the chair. Yeah, I thank you for the presentation, and I'm really glad that we've been able to work with your agency. It really complements what we're doing with our grazing leases to try to keep the fuel load down. And thank you for the update. I think I'm very encouraged with the direction we're headed here. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll just echo the same sentiment. Thank you for the work that you do down there, and really appreciate you coming to the board for the presentation. Have a great
Thank you
day.
for having us.
All right. We'll now move on to item number 3, our public hearing to consider recommending to the Monterey County Water Resources Agency Board of Supervisors. These will be rate fee increases for Zone 2B. Who will be presenting, starting at Ara?
Hello. Eva, do you have the PowerPoint? Oh, presentations. Oh, my PC. Ta-da. And will it pop up there? Excellent. Gotta love it when it works. So yeah, I'll be providing an overview about the budgeting process that we've been going through with respect to CSIP, SVRP, SRDF, with the focus particularly on CSIP and SVRP today, and the proposed water delivery charges. What we will do is we'll have the presentation, then opportunities for public comment, and then ask the directors to consider offering a recommendation for the Board of Supervisors to consider in their May and June meetings respectively. So the action would be to approve and adopt a water delivery charge of up to $89.60 for each acre foot in Zone 2B. To have agency staff notice a public hearing on May 29th, 2024 for the supervisors, and to request the clerk of the board to publish that hearing notice once a week for 2 consecutive weeks prior to the date set for the public hearing. So key budget preparation dates. On March 1st, the agency submitted to the county, per the county's requirements, what we refer to as a baseline budget. Subsequent to that, staff had considered requesting supplemental funding to support additional activities above the baseline. And so March 18th, we had an initial discussion, presentation for the directors. We had a more refined and detailed presentation for the CSIP Water Quality and Ops Committee meeting, and then a follow-up with the Agency Finance Committee meeting, as well as a workshop with CSIP landowners and growers. So a lot of steps have been taken leading up to today. Subsequent to today, on the calendar are the May 29th public hearing scheduled for the Board of Supervisors, and then the scheduled budget approval date of June 20th. And so we work backwards from that date. The CSIP budgeting process is defined by both the Agency Act and an ordinance. And so with respect to the Agency Act, I'm just kind of taking it at the highest level here. The Agency Act states that after approval of the budget by the directors, we will submit the budget to the Agency Board of Supervisors for its adoption. Of course, that's at the biggest layer, right? The Board of Supervisors ultimately are the ones that approve the budgets. But the agency's finances are also very intertwined with the counties. The county acts as our banker, they act as our auditor controller, and so much of what we do in terms of the timing and the process is really built off of the county's timing and process, and working backwards from that June 20th date. So related to that, earlier this month, the agency published a notice to notice this public hearing here today. The requirement to publish that notice is from the ordinance itself. and it states that at least 1 week before the Board of Directors meeting, the general manager shall publish a notice, including a proposed amount, and that following the public hearing, the director shall make a recommendation. So the notice itself doesn't mark a decision. I think there may have been some misunderstanding about what that particular document or notice means. It just simply was to provide awareness of today's hearing. So in any typical year, the process begins in December. Agency and M1 staff begin to identify the activities for the upcoming year and prepare their budget requests. The initial requests for CSIP, the Salinas Valley Reclamation Project, and for the Salinas River Diversion Facility was $23.4 million, or a 22% over the current approved budget. If we had moved forward to that, it would have resulted in a water delivery charge of up to almost $240 per acre foot. Recognizing that that was untenable, but before I get there, let's just highlight the work that was being done. So this is the activities. There were a dozen activities with estimated costs associated with them that were proposed to be undertaken for that rate. Much of this ended up on the cutting room floor, but of particular note and concern to us as staff is the construction of a second replacement well, and I'll talk about the wells in more detail here shortly. And then also beginning the replacement of the 21,000 volt switchgear. The high voltage equipment out in CSIP is definitely showing its age. We have had failures out there. Last year had a transformer go. We were fortunate in that we were able to get a used one. But this one keeps us up at night just because the lead times are so long. And, you know, there is potential for disruption if a piece of equipment goes down. So this is definitely going to remain a high priority for us moving forward. But for this year, we just decided to focus on the design phase. So kind of backing up to the initial request, so January and February, M1 staff and agency staff met frequently to review and refine the proposed budgets. We decided to propose to continue the delay of a number of important activities, and those delays result in reduced requests of $1.59 million under the CSIP fund. We reduced the request $1.54 million under the SVRP fund and $2.52 million under the SRDF for total reductions from the initial budget of $5.65 million. From there, we created the base budget, which I'll walk through momentarily, and then per the county, submitted our baseline budget on March 6th, which is the deadline they provided us. And the base budget represents a water delivery fee of $64.60 per acre foot. And so what does that cover? It really largely covers the CSIP utility and SVRP utility costs, the costs of chemicals, and a portion of salary and benefits increases. And it's important to understand that it only covers portions of these costs. We look at the $64 rate, and the way that rate gets split up is with $53.36 going to the SVRP for chemicals, utilities, and labor, and $11.24 going to CSIP for utilities and labor. So it's really the rate at this point in the base budget is very much focused on the day-to-day operations and maintenance of the facility. The chemical and utility trends, rather than relying on forecasts, we relied on analysis of the recent historical costs. And so these are actual numbers that we built next year's estimates off of. And, you know, respectively, there's a 33% increase in the chemical costs and a 17% increase in the utility costs. In addition, there were some very important items that we did want to cover, recognizing that the 6460 can only partially cover the total costs of the projects. Other sources of funding include the assessments, grants, the SRDF water service charge, and of course fund balances. And so we are relying quite heavily in the base budget from, drawing from reserves. And you can see CSIP is incurring the largest proposed impact at nearly $1.3 million. SVRP, we tried to keep closer, and as we did with SRDF, to a balanced budget. But the total fund impact under the base budget is nearly $1.5 million. So what we did keep in, notwithstanding the draw from reserves, was funding for the cathodic protection repair. The cathodic protection system is what maintains the pipes or prevents the pipes from corroding too quickly. We included the effort to initiate a master plan and rate study where we could begin to perform an assessment of the system's existing condition, and then develop a plan and a rate to begin to address that over a period of time. And then thought it was important to move forward with the replacement of one supplemental well. For budgeting purposes, we plugged in $300,000. However, we note that depending on how the costs of the replacement go, it could be from $300,000 to $600,000. The good news here is $900,000 of that will be funded by funds that we received from the United States Environmental Protection Agency in this federal fiscal year. So, moving from the base budget and the list of items that we left on the cutting room floor, if you will. Following the submission on March 6th to the county, staff began to prepare a request for an additional $25 per acre foot to fund supplemental well maintenance projects, to begin a design of the second replacement well, to perform a flow meter replacement and calibration, and to support new source water investigations. And so, if approved, these efforts would result in a proposed water delivery fee of $89.60 per acre. We presented this initially to the directors on March 18th, and again to the CSIP Water Quality and Ops Committee on March 21st. And so this has been refined a little bit as we've been having conversations over the last month or so, and this just helps to illustrate what those additional activities are and how they fit. So the supplemental well maintenance, we're eager to move forward on this because we recognize that we are in an excellent time to perform it. We are fortunate that we have surface water stored behind the reservoirs, and that we will likely, have a good run of the river this year as well as next. And so the need to rely on the wells is greatly diminished, and so it creates for us an opportunity to take them offline to perform this maintenance work at a time where it would likely be low disruptive to system operations. What we want to achieve here, we want to improve the operational efficiency. We find a number of these wells are not producing as they once did. We certainly want to improve reliability, and we certainly want to get these things done before the next drought. And so to update where we are on the wells, currently what we anticipate in operation for the 2024 season are 8 wells. In 2022, we had 10 in service, but since that time, we've had 2 go out. One, we have confirmed, has suffered a collapse, and so will require destruction and replacement, and that's the one we're proposing to do with the $1.2 to $1.5 million. The second one is undergoing assessment currently, but initial indications are that it is in fairly poor condition and likely in need of replacement. We'll know more in the coming weeks. Well replacements take a while, and so securing the location is probably the hardest but most important piece of it. Of course, there's the design and permitting and construction. Construction's heavily weather dependent. And so it can take up to 2 years to replace a well, which is why we're wanting to get going now while we know we have some time. Probably the most important decision to be made is determining the feasibility of the areas for replacement wells. what's the quality of the well? Are there utilities in place? Is there a land owner who's willing to work with us? So a number of factors that go into that consideration. And then just as a reminder, the agency has been working with our federal representatives to pursue additional federal funding, and so we have submitted congressionally directed spending requests to Senator Butler and Senator Padilla, as well as the House equivalent to Representative Lofgren. And so we do continue to pursue outside sources of funding to help support the important work to replace these wells. The flow meter and calibration project, this really addresses the fact that these are mechanical flow meters that were installed 25 years ago. Mechanical meters only do one thing over time, and that is slow down. And we do see discrepancies between the volume of water calculated for production versus delivery, and so we want to be able to address that. The idea here would be to purchase some backup meters, and so we don't have to take a turnout offline when the calibration is being performed. In between irrigations, we can simply remove a meter, put in a new meter, take the old one, get it calibrated, put it on the shelf when we're ready for the next turn of that wheel. And so the idea is to be able to do these, this systematic calibration in a way that isn't disruptive to deliveries to the growers. And ultimately, what we're aiming to do here is ensure the accuracy of our groundwater monitoring as well as our water delivery and billing data. And then lastly, they ask for support for the negotiations with the City of Salinas to really get into issues that remain uncertain, such as the Regional Water Quality Control Board requirements, and so will we need technical support there, and so forth in terms of helping to facilitate a negotiation. So why we plugged in a small number to help support that work effort. So those were the activities we proposed to undertake under what we're calling the recommended activities. And this is what that budget looks like. And so one question that has come up a lot is about the consultants. It's probably not great nomenclature on our part. These are by and large contractors. It's not just consultants. You can see that number is largely filled with the supplemental well replacement. But you can see the other activities that fall underneath that category. Some of these are regulatory in nature, and so they need to move forward. Some of these are funded by other agencies, such as DEPA or the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. Some are included, like cathodic protection, in our base budget request, and some represent work that we would propose to do under the recommended activities. And so, but that's how that 2.6 million breaks out. So, having gone through this, we met with the Finance Committee on April 5th, presented both the budgets to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee expressed its concern with the magnitude of the proposed increases. In all of the discussions that have been going on, the vast majority of folks see the necessity of the work that's being proposed. The question has really been more about how rapidly we can get to, a revenue stream that can support all of that work. And so the Finance Committee expressed that concern and requested that staff prepare 2 additional options, both below the rate of the base budget. So staff subsequently prepared that. One option we were asked to take a look at was at approximately a 20% increase over the current rate. And so that's what we're referring to as option X. And then option Y, essentially we're splitting the difference between the 20% increase and the base budget. And so, it's arbitrary somewhat, but this really doesn't affect what's being proposed in terms of the work, or in other words, there isn't a relationship in these numbers between the work that's proposed and the way that drives a rate, as opposed to this being more reflective of the willingness or ability to pay the rate and the need to step into it. And so those were the rates that we had proposed or prepared in response to the Finance Committee's request. And so we present them here side by side. And so you have 4 options for consideration. So there's the recommended activities rate, there's the base budget rate that we submitted to the county, there's option Y, which is halfway between that, and then option X, which is the lowest rate. And then you can see the way it falls out. Now, we'll show this both for CSIP and for the SVRP. In this particular area, you'll notice there's a change in the consultant's cost of $300,000, and what we backed out of that was $300,000 for the first well replacement, just recognizing that that work could drag out into the next fiscal year, and so we could defer obligation of those dollars. The risk on, the other side of the risk on all of that is if the work proceeds more quickly, then we'll have to stop. But it does also buffer the impact on the fund balances some degree, which is a good thing. And so for Fund 132, because the costs there are basically the operations, the daily operations and maintenance, that you see how the changes in rate directly step into the incremental revenue reductions, right? So each one hits fund balance a little bit harder. But it is doable. It really comes down to, what level of fund balance folks are comfortable with. And I think this highlights the importance of, considering a reserve policy to describe, what would we be using fund balances for in the future, and what are appropriate levels of fund balance to maintain. So those are the 4 options that we've developed. Just a reminder, the water delivery revenue, we're doing those rate estimates based on 20,000 acre-feet of water delivered, so that is the average of deliveries out there. The total fiscal impacts, they remain unknown, and that will be dependent upon, of course, whatever recommendation you all make, as well as whatever final decision the Board of Supervisors make, a little bit more than 2 months from now. One thing I wanted to highlight, and this is just to, highlight kind of the way perspectives affect all of this. And so the proposed change in water delivery rates, the water delivery rate is only one component in terms of the total revenue to support the programs, right? So if you think about the 3 physical systems we have and everything that goes into operating them in conjunction, right? You've got this whole sort of program, if you will. And so it's really easy to focus in on the rates. And if I'm a grower, I'm looking at these rates and I'm looking at these jumps, and they are substantial, right? And so I totally understand the concern about, how high, how fast, and that all makes sense. As project managers, the way we're looking at it is in the context of the total revenues, right, to support the project. And when we look at the total revenues in the 24 approved budget that we're currently in versus under the recommended base option Y or option X alternatives, what you can see is the percentage change is quite a bit smaller, far less impactful, negative, right, in some of the options, which is concerning when we're sitting down and we're looking at this list of activities that need to be performed, and contemplating the revenues that are required to do it. But this reflects not just that one revenue component being the water delivery rate. This represents the assessments, the grants, the water delivery rate, all of the other components. And so, again, from a systems perspective, this is the way that we would tend to look at it. And so just 2 different perspectives on the same 4 proposals. So next steps. So assuming there's a director's recommendation today, we'll direct the clerk of the board to notice the public hearing for the agency's supervisors on May 29th. And then whatever comes of that public hearing, the final budget will be presented to the agency's supervisors on June 20th for them to consider adoption. If there is no recommendation today, then we'll need to schedule a special meeting of the directors so that we can, in fact, develop a recommendation. Likely need to do that the last week of April or certainly the first week of May. and because we still need to be able to provide the clerk the information they need to notice the agency supervisor's public hearing on May 29th. So that is my overview of the CSIP budget options as we see them today, where we've been and how we got here. And so, yeah, just to recap, today's action, it would be to approve and adopt the water delivery charge, to notice the meeting for May 29th, and to direct the clerk to publish those notices. And this concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Ara. And for my board of directors, normally when I do a public hearing, I like to hear from the public first so that when we have our conversation, we have all the information available. So given that and seeing a concurrence with my fellow board of directors, I will now open the public hearing. Any members of the public who would like to speak on this item?
Good afternoon. The state of the agriculture industry right now in the...
Sir, can you please state your name, please,
absolutely.
for the record?
Ryan Kelly. So again, the state of the agriculture industry in this area is on probably about the worst 5-year run that it's been on in recent history. Business is moving out. Tax revenue is going down. Really have to watch our spending very, very closely. I believe that we should table any vote on rate adjustment pending submittal of an operational budget and priority list for the capital projects with a little more detail than we've seen thus far. Supporting rationale provided thus far is insufficient to support an increase of this magnitude. It also includes a 10% hike on salary and benefits. No one in the private sector has gotten that kind of an increase in recent history. Our economy is in a recessed state at this time, and we just can't afford that kind of a hike. We know we need to increase, but we have to do it in a sustainable way. I would support one of the lower increases and, revisit it next year for additional projects and management actions. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Steve Rodoni, property owner in the project area. Been involved with the project since 1992, when the first meetings before it was ever built. I also oppose the rate increase. As I said, I'd like to see more detail, more accountability financially of what it's going towards, and look at a lower tier increase if one is going to be put in place, and revisit next year with more detailed budgets and more expectations, meaning if I'm going to fund something, I want to see a timeline when it's going to be completed and what it actually costs. Not just a proposed budget and everyone agrees to it and we're paying for it, because as Brian said, it's not a good economy right now and we're all bleeding money and we don't want to pay any more than we have to at this point. We all have wish lists of what we'd like to do on our farm. And it's not feasible for us to pay this much more of an increase this year for water in our district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bill Light, Monterey County resident. I just hope you do something to get this moving forward, whatever option you choose, and I know it's not an easy one, but there are some long-dated capital requirements to upkeep this system, to make it better. I think the GM just presented sort of what their budget number is on his professional opinion, and I think it should be respected. But I understand this is something, it's never a good time to increase rates. Maybe now is worse than others, but at some point this has to be fixed. And we have to really take on this seawater intrusion problem that's presented itself over the last 60 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gary Beck, and I went to the grower and landowner meeting last week, and Ira kind of brushed over the fact that over there since 2011, they've held rates relatively low, and all of a sudden a massive increase. And we kind of had a impromptu discussion there at that meeting, and we were thinking more like rates should go up over a longer period of time at a lower rate, because I've only been involved with the system for about 5 years now as a manager out there. And over that time period, there's been a lot of issues with it. And I've always heard of this thing, deferred maintenance, deferred maintenance, deferred maintenance. I really hope that the agency would seek funding from the federal government. I just received 2 things here from Zoe Lofgren and Jimmy Panetta. Both of their districts are out in the CSIP area. Zoe Lofgren, she brought in $50 million for projects, and Jimmy Panetta brought in $15 million for projects. Well, this project hits a lot of hot points. Water safety, for Salinas water, well water, saltwater intrusion, the basement management plan, and a lot of other issues, environmental stuff, recycling. I think these people would be interested in that, and you should seek more outside funding, state and federal. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public here in the chambers like to speak on this item? Do we have anyone online?
No hands raised.
All right. I will ask one more time for both online and in the chambers, or anyone else that would like to speak during this public hearing. Hearing and seeing none, I close the public hearing. We'll now come back to the board for conversation, and I do want to make a couple comments before we go forward. Appreciate everybody's input. Ara, please correct me, but we are currently working with our legislators on a congressionally directed grant for $3 million.
That's correct. We have requests in for $3 million for the upcoming federal fiscal year, yes.
And would that apply to CSIP?
That
for
is
CSIP
exactly what it's for,
specifically?
yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that the public understood that we are looking at all different options as well. And because those are absolutely crucial sources of revenue. All right. Now the fun begins. Fellow board members, who would like to start? Any questions or comments? I got a question. Absolutely. And then I'll go to you, Ken. No, you first.
So there was 4 options, but the first option was up to $89. How does that get, why is there 4 choices, but the first one being almost like a variable choice? How does that get analyzed?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Marvin, and it has to do with the requirement in the ordinance that we post an amount. And so the amount that we posted in there would be the highest rate possible, but the directors can certainly choose, anything below that. We just couldn't go beyond it, so that's why we said up to. And so there are the 4 options there, things in between.
But it's not based off of reality or facts or performance or budgets or actual numbers at the end of the day?
No, the 8960 is, there's a lot of detail behind, a 25-slide PowerPoint presentation. So the base budget is, if you think about it this way, it really reflects the day-to-day O&M, okay, with a few really important maintenance activities that we're proposing not be funded by the rate, but out of reserves. And so that's the base budget, and that's the budget we submitted to the county on March 6th per their requirements. We then created the recommended activities budget. Now that's the one that adds up to 8960 or whatever the number is. And that reflects the additional activities that we would propose to do. So that would be fully funding the supplemental well maintenance for this year. That would be undertaking the design work for the second supplemental well. That would be implementing the meter calibration program and then providing some funding to support investigations for new source water supplies. So those are the 4 activities that would be performed that make up the difference between the base budget and the recommended. Then conversely, on the 2 that we were asked to prepare by the Finance Committee, there isn't, the one thing we cut out was the $300,000 that relates to the supplemental well replacement, recognizing that could take up to 2 years. And so there is a bit of risk in doing that, but it didn't seem unmanageable. And so we did cut a bit more activity out of that budget, but really, because the base is very much the base, the rest of that rate reduction would have to come out of reserves, which just simply means, that we need to address that out and over time. And I think folks have, noted that. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you, Ara, for your presentation. Yeah, it is really sobering to see the kinds of amounts were there, but it's clear to me that this overall program is completely underfunded and is just waiting to fall apart if we don't agree at some point to pay these things. I worry about the supplemental wells. I mean, I've been watching that every year. I mean, we all have. Going down, and we're lucky we got some money to help do some destruction, and we're lucky we've got a little bit of a grant right now. I'm going back to the original number, which is I think it's 234 an acre foot of water. Was that the original thing that you?
Oh, 238. Yeah, it was the initial staff all getting together and identifying their list of a dozen things. Yes.
Okay. Every single one of those things must happen at some point for this program, right? Because we have to, obviously, even the studies, because I didn't see anything on there that doesn't have to happen.
Correct. Okay,
so if we were going to go with less than the 89, we would have to do a 218, right? I mean, at some point, we've got to make up that money somewhere or other. The program will not continue to run at this level of funding.
Right. There are a number of paths forward to make the revenue stream more robust than it is today. Updating the Prop 218 engineers report is one of the alternatives. What we were very much looking at here this year, given the timing and giving the opportunity that we have to perform some work, was more reliance on the water delivery charge rather than an engineer's report and a 218 update, because that, can cost a significant amount and then, also takes an awful lot of time. And so that's why in this moment we were relying more on the water delivery charge than other rate alternatives, such as what we've discussed, say, for dam safety funding. That said, I would very much look to the master planning process that we want to initiate to help inform what that more robust revenue, that combination of revenues might look like, right? So currently it is assessments, rates, and grants. And so what's the right mix of those things going forward?
Okay, thank you for that. It just seems like I understand the tough position that the staff's been put into at this point, and it just seems like it seems to me that we have got to do the replacement well now because we're not in a drought. If you look at the numbers of the pumping that we did in the last drought, you can see that we're going to get to a point where people are not be able to get their water delivery. So that will affect the entire program. Thank you.
Other board members?
Yep. Thanks. Thank you for that report. I probably have a bit of a different perspective than Director Eklund. I think it's important that everybody does understand, number one, is the total amounts of dollars that are being spent out there. The CSIP Zone 2Y, 2B, $347 an acre. Zone 2Y, another $4. Zone 2Z, another $12. There's another delivery fee of $84.22 on top of the current $37.24. When the diversion facility, another $6.18. So when you add all those things up, you're looking at $650 an acre for those projects out there. I'm looking at the projects and that list of the projects, and a lot of that project are one-time deals. These are one-time projects that are going to get put into place, like drilling of a new well. I can't understand why we have $140,000 for design and engineering of a well. We drilled a well in the Deep Aquifer. It never even came close to $140,000 for a consultant on something like this. So I don't understand why some of the dollars are there. But that being said, our agency is also, there were some questions asked of our agency at the grower meeting. And one of those questions was, where is the $200,000 that are supposed to come from the hydroelectrical dams to CSIP every year? And apparently about 10 years ago, it stopped flowing into CSIP. So there are funds that may be coming in from projects that we haven't been getting the money from. We have to audit that. We have to look into that. We also have some other potential dollars that can be coming into the coffers of CSIP. We're waiting to know what those things are. So I'm looking at a fee that we're wanting to implement, but I'm also seeing a lot of money that can be coming into the CSIP coffers, and I have a difficult time taking into account what some of the other growers have stated about costs and fees, and nothing is getting cheaper out there, and then going and raising our rates on them again, and then becoming flush with money from like the hydroelectrical or other sources. So I have a difficult time wanting to raise it any more than the bare minimums until we can make a clear accounting of the monies that should be in the CSIP. Also, I know that there have been times where the monies have been pulled from these funds to fund other projects, other projects, and we need to make sure that we've been reimbursed for those things. Like when we did the repairs on the diversion facility, we need to make sure that all those funds we've been reimbursed. So I think until those things get answered, I think we should be looking at the bare bone minimum.
And then you, John.
Yeah, I would agree also with Scatini that looking at the bare bones minimum, hearing from the growers, I haven't heard what the outcome of the meeting was Monday, really, some of the responses from the public there. But, in doing the bare bone minimums, I think the public needs to know also that there are going to be things that are not going to get addressed. And as long as people are fully understanding of that if something happens, that this is a result of us reducing the recommendation. And that's kind of my thoughts. I would be more enticed of moving with the lower rate, at least for this year, and see where we're at. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. So I've been part of this since the first meeting was held in Castroville. And I've always been 1,000% supportive of the CSIP. Fabulous project. it's old. We have a few water delivery systems that are old in this system, old in this county, going back 60 years with our reservoirs, 25 years with CSIP. With that said, we need to correct every problem to make these water delivery systems efficient, starting with the reservoirs and ending up here at the mouth of the river. With that said, the January and February staff meetings that were held talking about the budget and what they were going to do was with Fund 131, 132, 134 was great. But they made one mistake. Staff should have reached out to stakeholders at that time and asked their opinion of what they were thinking about when you were making your budget cuts. Ask the stakeholders what they thought was on their list rather than on your lists. The public outreach for this increase has been zero. I was very upset being the chair of the Finance Committee meeting, realizing that we had to vote on something at Finance without it ever having stakeholder opinion. The stakeholder opinion meeting was the following Monday. And regardless, it was already published the night before in the Coast Weekly at $89. So when Finance went through everything, there was an issue. I've been told, well, stakeholders had plenty of time to go make their comments. No, stakeholders don't have plenty of time. They don't go to 8 o'clock meetings. They don't go to noontime meetings. They don't go on the internet to look at financials. They need a 3 o'clock meeting or a 4 o'clock meeting in the afternoon to be able to look at things. Unfortunately, the stakeholders work at an early hour. And so it isn't as easy as, well, there was a 10:30 meeting, why didn't you attend this? Or why didn't, not feasible. Just not feasible. These are gentlemen, people that live off the ground, work the ground, and make a living off the ground. So with that said, it was left up to our budget committee workshop that we had at Laguna Seca at 8 o'clock. We had a water quality and ops meeting at 10 o'clock in, I don't even know where that was, Marina or Salinas, and a finance meeting. That was our only outreach until we had the Farm Bureau meeting last Monday, a week ago. So we need to do a better job in outreach on doing, we need to fix things, Ara. You know me, I've been standing on top of a soapbox as everybody on this board saying we need to fix this, we need to fix that. We can't kick the can down the road. And I still believe that. But I have issues with this amount as quickly as it was compiled by staff and then disseminated out to the stakeholders. It caught a lot of people off guard. Shouldn't have. They should have been kept in the loop all the way around. And unfortunately, there was no transparency. Work does need to be done. There are key components out there. You ask the stakeholders what those components are. They'll tell you what we need to work on. They have a different list than what staff has. But I believe that over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll get those projects done. All of them. We have a water service delivery charge, water service charge of $86.24 for this coming year. So that goes up every year as a cost of living increase. Is that correct?
This year, it is being proposed to raise by the cost of living. I don't think it has gone up every year by the cost of living.
Okay. So that is on top of what the delivery charge is. deferring our options is not the best, but we're going to have to defer stuff. I look at what the state's doing, and they're deferring a lot of their options down next year and the year after. I don't like it, but you know what? Maybe we've got to follow policy and follow what they're doing. On our reserve policy, on what our reserves are, I don't think we have a written policy of what we use the reserves for. So until we have a policy that's written of what we're going to use the reserves for, it's kind of hard to build up the reserves. I can remember all the reserves 10, 12 years ago were up $5, $6 million. That's why we cut back the delivery fees. I served on that board. I wish we wouldn't have done it, but send your hate mail to me. At the worst case scenario, in my opinion, is option the 20% increase, which would be option X. I don't like it, but I know we have to feed the coffers something, and possibly look at this 6 months down the road, if need be. There's lots of moving pieces out there right now, so we don't know what's going to happen 90 days from now, or 160 days, 180 days from now. So 6 months from now, we could win the lotto and have plenty of money. But I think I have a pretty good idea what goes on out there. And like I said, I don't like it. But I understand finances and farming out there. I farmed out there most of my life, and it's tough. It's tough to see a big increase 1 year. And we'll get there. We will get there, and we will fix everything. That project is something to be very proud of, and the stakeholders are very proud of that project. So don't ever think that we're going to let it get to such a shape like another project down south that we will keep it. We will get it updated. It just is going to take some time. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Wait, Matt first.
I have a question. Okay.
Go ahead again.
Are you
sure? Okay. No, I just want to say that I find myself agreeing with everything that's been said by the fellow directors and all members of the public. This is a tough one. I don't see how we can do the 8960 this year just so dramatically, but we do need to increase these funds and get these projects back on track, and maybe we approve one of these lower amounts, and knowing that it's going to be something similar probably next year as well, just to get these things funded. But if we have more time to do a little more investigation, explain to the stakeholders what these improvements are and what these costs go towards, it might be a little less dramatic and impactful to their businesses.
Thank you. I have a question for the general manager. Before we vote, can you bring up again and explain options X and Y? Because I really, with some emphasis on the ability to do a replacement well this year. Thank you.
Sure. So the replacement well work is being proposed to fund through 131, which is the CSIP fund. In both the recommended and in the base budgets, what we set aside for the first well replacement is $1.2 million. And I think it's right. But 1.2 million, 900,000 of which is expected to be funded through the US EPA funding. I just can't find it right now. There it is. And then right now we're estimating 300,000 out of the fund balance. But recognizing that while that's the number we've plugged in for budgeting purposes, experience suggests that the well replacement could be more expensive, and so we do recognize that, and that the range is $300,000 to $600,000. In the option X and Y rates, we back this $300,000 out in recognition of the fact that we have the 900, we will have the 900 from the United States Environmental Protection Agency to get the work going, that the work could take, longer than the upcoming fiscal year. And while there is some risk to backing it out, it's an acceptable risk, just given the state of things.
But wouldn't we just be taking the remainder of that out of the reserves?
Correct.
Okay.
And even the way it's proposed now, it would be coming out of
the reserve.
Which is why you don't see a change in fund balance between those different scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
And so there's a couple of things I want to clarify. One is we do not have a reserve. And we need to create a reserve policy for each one of these funds. And then that way we can start getting closer to what is going towards the long-term replacements and what is usable for these activities. So I think that is something, whatever happens, that we need to have that discussion to create those reserve policies for all these funds, for all the revenue that's coming in. One of the gentlemen mentioned the gap where there wasn't any increase, and that is just something that happened. Ideally, you would never want to get in that situation again. And I will say my feeling is we need to move forward in some manner that gets us away from that. We need to get into whatever the cost of living mode is, like we'll see with some of the other items on our agenda. We're looking for cost of living increases. Those are more manageable. Those are more easy to budget for. And when you're planning out and believe me, I'm not a grower, but I understand how hard life is and how it is tough. And so I feel for you, because people do not understand what you bear to make food available for their families. They take it for granted, and they don't realize how much work, how much day after day after day, 7 days a week it takes for them to go to the grocery store to get fed. They never see this aspect of the cost that you have to bear.
Mr. Chair, I have one other thing. I want to echo what Director Scatini said. Could we at some time have a discussion, maybe it will happen today, about how much is promised in the hydro reserve? Because it does change over years, and that's probably another thing, which frankly is a policy like our reserve policy. And who's doing that? Because I believe originally it was the Board of Supervisors that were taking money out of the hydro for a couple of years for the Sleece Valley Water Project, if I recall correctly. So that we don't want to miss that. That's a very good and a long-term problem that we've had here about that.
No, and I was actually getting to that next, because that is an important point that he rose, but those are not going to be answered today. They're not going to be answered next month, and they're not going to be answered in the next 3 months. And while we have to get those answers to find out, that's going to take some research. Thought I lost the mic there. And additionally, any other money that may have been taken from funds and not paid back. That's another thing that we need to figure out. And if it happened, find out that paper trail. But what I see right now is where we're at today. And as hard as it is, I want to get us to a point that we're not bringing these types of increases to the growers like this on a consistent basis. I do want to remind everybody, the rate fee is a fluctuating thing. So next year, let's say we got a bunch of grants in and we got a lot of this work done. That doesn't mean this is a set rate for every year after this. It can go down. The growers could come to us next year and say, we want X, Y, and Z, and it's going to cost this. That would mean it could go up. So it's not the same as a Prop 218 where that fee is set. It's not the same where those fees just get the COLA, that it never goes down. These are based on what is actual. Given that, I do hear what my fellow board members are saying, and I think I can definitely agree on the lower rates, X or Y. I probably lean more towards the Y, the 55, but I am open to the lower rate increase because we do, look, this work has to be done. We have to get this. Each one of these items, the lower the rate, it's going to use more of that fund balance, which means that just goes down. And you're right, we don't know what'll happen next year. We don't know what'll happen in 6 months. We may get another grant. Things can turn around, but we cannot put the system in that kind of scenario of a what if. We need to get to a scenario where this is what we have, this is what needs to be done, and we can pay for it. But that can't be done on the backs overnight. So that's where I'm at. I would prefer a Y, the 55 I thought, but I am amenable to any suggestions.
I got a question, Chair.
Yeah.
On option X, there's a design of a second well replacement. And if I can get some information on if we've been drilling wells, why is there such a large cost for designing a well? Maybe just my lack of knowledge of that process.
Yeah, and so in X, the only well work that remains in X or Y, Director Gonzalez, would be the work that we'd be doing on the first supplemental well replacement. Well, I guess technically the second, but the one that's in front of us. And that being funded by the $900,000 US EPA funds. The costs associated, so here's the downside to the federal funding is there's also an entire other level of regulatory requirements that come with it. And so that's a piece of accepting that money. And so, so it adds time, it adds cost, and so that's what we would be doing under options X or Y, would be utilizing the EPA funding, and then moving forward as far as we can with that, assuming that we can get to the next fiscal year, and then the balance of necessary funding gets approved.
Well, if there's, I'll put a motion on the floor, Mr. Chair, if anybody else needs to have a conversation.
Before you do, could you put that slide up again with the X and Y so that we're looking at it when we're voting on it?
Yeah. Yeah, there's two slides. One is the 131 slide, which is up right now, and then there's the similar slide with 132.
Isn't that a slide? Okay. There was one, I think it's in our board report, right? That one's
No, this is the presentation.
page 21 of this presentation actually shows X and Y.
This one?
That one.
There we go.
And then you had the other portion just below it that showed the overall revenues. Yeah, that one I think is a good one to look at. Is that okay, Ken? I know it doesn't show all the projects, but it clearly shows what we're talking about.
Can I just make one other comment?
Absolutely.
Mark,
And we'll leave, and then no one make a motion. Mark was going to, so.
Yeah, I think it's important for the public to understand that all of these lands are being rented and they're being negotiated with the landowners, regardless if that landowner's in New York City or if that's your father. You're still paying rent on all of this, and rent is a calculation based on the land, what you can grow, food safety, water, the cost of water, and total taxes. And so these are things that are negotiated typically on a 3-year cycle. And so having a substantial increase on any of those things, you know, as an agency, we have to give enough time and leeway for people to be able to go back out and negotiate those rates accordingly and fairly with their landlords. Unfortunately, when it comes to a water delivery fee, that water delivery fee does not go to the landowner. It goes to the tenant. It goes to whoever is actually farming it. But it still is the cost of doing business on the land, and it has to be negotiated with the landlord. So another reason why moving slowly through this process is critical for the viability of farming in the northern region.
So if I can also then bounce off of that, then in the outreach process, we could probably, is there a way that we can move that forward a little bit? So if we have a little kind of looking into the crystal ball, that then you can reach out to the farmers or the growers ahead of time, because they pretty much all is the same general time of the year, or the leases are all over the map?
Typically, leases start in November, but the negotiations are dependent upon each contract. So some leases, you have a contract that's, you know, maybe fixed for 3 years. It may have an annual kicker per year. You may have an opener after 2, after 3, after 4. They vary quite a bit, but you still have to give opportunity, you know, as much advance notice as we possibly can.
And that's where I see there's an opportunity for us to engage on a different level that I don't know if it's been done in the past or not, but then maybe that's something we can explore in the future. But I'm ready to propose, you know, option X. I know it's the lowest one. It is, there's going to be an additional hit of $460,500 to the general fund. But as other directors have said, this is we don't know where we'll be in 6 months.
I'll second.
Appreciate that. And just if I can add, yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask both the maker of the motion and seconder, would you consider a compromise amendment of between X and Y of just a straight $50?
I'm going to stick to what the staff has recommended. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair.
All right. Before I call for the motion, couple comments. Thank you for the very good discussion. I know this is not easy, and everybody is hearing from everyone, and we're all trying to make this work. And I really appreciate that, because that's how we go forward. And I want to echo what Mark was saying on the engagement portion of it. I think the growers are seeing the numbers. At some point, we have to get to a point where things are not draining the funds. And that's crucial. So if we can start having that conversation of what next year is going to look like, and letting them know, you know, we're going after this $3 million and how that could help benefit and keep things down or keep any rate increases either low or to none. Hearing if there's any options in them for any optimization opportunities. Those conversations going forward as we get to this process next year, I think will be very, very beneficial. I also want to make sure that we're all in concurrence on some of the direction that we've talked about, which is creating a reserve policy. That could be brought up at a later date, but I think Ara and staff, you've heard us all have that discussion now. We would like to have that discussion as an agenda item as well. We have a first and a second. Do you have a comment before we make?
Yeah, a real quick comment. I concur with your policy statement. If we're going to have a reserve, let's have it line by line what it's for. Highs, lows, minimums, and not defer outside that barrier. But before we have a reserve, we need to have a written policy on it. Secondly, I hope now the agency has a email list that they can reach out to people. Prior to this, it wasn't that good. They didn't know how to have outreach to the stakeholders in this zone to confer. So hopefully that list gets better and your outreach will improve immensely the next time we do this, if we have to do it again. But those are just two comments.
No, I appreciate it. Any final comments before we call for the vote?
I'd almost go for saying that I know there's a Water Quality and Ops Committee, but I would almost go for a secondary committee with maybe some of the growers in the audience in attendance and to talk about the budget and to talk about the work that needs to be done there and potentially even given to some insight on some of the things that should or shouldn't be done for the maintenance of the program or maintenance of the project, like design, etc.
And just adding to that, 15 years ago, when I sat on the Water Quality and Ops and was chair or vice chair of it, we had finance of water resource show up every meeting to give us a complete breakdown of what we had in the funds, what was available, and what the project needs were. Now, 15 years ago, they weren't as bad as they were, but we have no outreach with financials at our Water Quality and Ops. So that might be something we want. Water Quality and Ops is basically all we look at, and Paul's out in the crowd, is we look at water quality. We look at volume of water used that past 30 days. We look at if there's any spikes in the water. It's basically what it says, water quality and operations of the facility. Nothing more, nothing less. So it might be something to look at. Last thing we need is another committee, but.
No, look, I am hesitant on creating another committee, but I think it would be easy enough to have Finance Committee ask that the information we are receiving to be provided to that committee. So we'll have that conversation offline, but I don't see that as really a problem. All right, we do have a first and a second. Approving staff recommendation A, B, and C, substituting the amount with the amount from X, which was, where was that?
45.24?
$45.24 an acre foot. All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
That was, okay.
I thought you wanted us to vote again. I said aye.
Oh, no, that was the against. Okay, you threw me off there. Passes unanimously, everybody. Thank you again. A very robust conversation. Appreciate it. We'll now move on to item number 4. Update on the analysis. Make sure it's correct. Yeah. Update on analysis of 2023 seawater intrusion data. Tamara?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess, everybody. Tamara Voss here with the Water Resources Agency, and I've got an update for you today on the 2023 seawater intrusion data set. I'm going to try to get my 3 screens to share appropriately. Okay, can you see my slideshow? I just want to confirm I've got the correct one up.
Not yet.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's the cover? Okay. Sorry.
Looks like we got it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. So back in January or February, when we brought the 2023 seawater intrusion contour lines to y'all, there were some questions that came out of it regarding the kind of the diversity of chloride concentrations in front of and behind the 500 milligram line itself. And so we went back and took a look at some of this data as kind of a further way to figure out how we can explain how we analyze this data, and that is kind of the big picture regional kind of what's going on in the area and how we look at it. So if I can start off real briefly here, you've heard me talk about this before. The Seawater Intrusion Monitoring Program, we go out and we collect samples twice a year. We collect them in June and in August every year. And then we do some additional sampling of the small dedicated monitoring wells, which are the little 2-inch size ones, a little bit afterwards in September, strictly because we have to rent a piece of equipment, and it just the flow of the process is the only reason why we do that a little bit later. When we go out and we sample, we do a lot of QA at that time. So we collect field blanks, we collect field duplicates, we collect trip blanks, and those types of things. And then that water is taken to the laboratory. It's taken to an ELAP certified laboratory, and they do their analysis. And part of the laboratory analysis processes, there's a whole suite of QA/QC that occurs as well. And then we get that data, those results back from the laboratory, and we do our workup using the geochemical tools that you've seen me talk about before, the Piper diagrams, the stiff diagrams, the time series for chloride and conductivity, the chloride over sodium or sodium over chloride molar ratio graphs. And so we have all that analysis goes on. In addition to, we look at that data set how it compares up with what's going on with the groundwater level elevation contouring and with the GEMS data set, the pumping in the areas. We look at well completion reports so that we know where the screen or intervals are. So we do a lot of pre-work before we even get to the contouring process. And so one of the big pieces, the big geochemical tools that we look at, that I talk about is the Piper diagrams. And so we thought we'd go back and kind of take a look at the Piper diagrams again and kind of show you how we look at non-intruded phase 1 and phase 2 using the Pipers, and then how that kind of also relates to, there is a variability in chloride concentrations, but what we're looking at here with those contouring is the big picture, is kind of the regional and not just on a site by site, very specific, narrow kind of time or kind of step. And so with that, you've seen my Piper diagrams before. This plots up 10 analytes all in one go. We have native that kind of plots out here in the middle. Phase 1 is when you start to see the data plot up from sample after sample, year after year, up towards this upper area. And then phase 2 is when it kind of descends back down here. Basically, what's happening is that sodium is now rising in the water portion of the sample, and so we can see it. And so what we did is we took a look at all of the wells that are sampled, and we classified them as non-intrusive, basically native, phase 1 or phase 2. And just a quick little couple of examples here. This is a Piper diagram example of no seawater intrusion. All the data points for this particular well, year after year after year, plot kind of right on top of one another. Here are the cations in this lower triangle over here, and they kind of stack on top of one another. And then on this other triangle over here, that's the anions, the negatively charged ions, and they also plot kind of right on top of one another. Here's another example of unintruded or kind of, native water quality. And you can kind of see there is a little bit of variability. So these things don't always stack right on top of one another. There's a little bit of messiness in here, but this would be a well that we would categorize not intruded also. Here's a quick example of a phase one. You can kind of see the older samples shown in the darker blue, kind of stepping through the color ramp all the way up to the red, kind of the more recent one in 2023. And this is clearly marching up. You see chloride increasing, you see calcium being booted off of the substrate, and sodium then binds up to the matrix, the soil matrix itself. Got another example here. This is phase one. This would be what we would consider very early phase one. It doesn't have a huge history of moving up, but the data set is, for the past 12 years. And you can start to see it ticking up here. So this would be an example of phase one. Phase two is a little bit harder to see sometimes because we don't always get to see that whole trend up and then the descending trend. So this one is in a well that we started sampling in 2003 and kind of has just hung out here in this area with just the tiniest bit of movement down here. So this would be kind of very early phase two example. Here's another example of phase two. You can kind of see where we first were able to catch it and sample it in 2003. This is also happens to be a dedicated monitoring well that the agency owns. And you can kind of see it trending down here towards seawater intrusion. Another example, you can kind of see that top little turn that occurred there. This data set starts at 1999 through 2023. And you can kind of see that turn as well. So what did we do? So let's start off here with in the 180-foot aquifer. This is the 2023 500 milligram contour line and all the historical polygons that go to make up the data set here, the historical data set. In the 2023 year, we had just the slightest bit of increase in the 180-foot aquifer for our 500 milligram line, kind of underneath this this large lobe right here, and just a tiny sliver on the smaller, more southern lobe occur. And so what we did is we took all the wells, which these black dots represent, that we sampled in 2023 and in June and in August and in September. And we then took a look at their pipers and we categorized them. So a piper that was unintruded or represented by the green circles, a piper that shows phase one is the kind of yellowy orange colored squares, and a phase two well, water quality well, is shown by the red triangles. And the number that's right next to these symbols on here is the actual chloride concentration of that particular well. And so you can see that we do have, kind of within a nearby area right in here, there are quite a few, we've got some phase one, we've got some not intruded right here, we got phase two behind there. So, excuse me. So in a nearby geographic area, you can see we do have this extent of a range of chlorides that we'll see from time to time. And then here's the 400-foot aquifer, same thing. This is the 500 milligram contour line with all the previous years of polygons represented for the data set. In 2023, we had a small advancement on this what we call this large island out in front of the regional seawater intrusion in this area, and another small little sliver here. The main body did not have advancement in 2023. And then this one has got, once again, all of the dots that make up the sampling, the locations for all the wells that we sample. And then we've taken those wells and we've categorized them, looking at the different pipers as unintruded phase one or phase two, same symbology, green circles, orange triangles, or excuse me, orange squares and red triangles. And once again, you can kind of see, excuse me, my mouse is too sensitive here. You can see that, like, for example, down here, just side by side, we have an unintruded well and we have a well that is over 500 milligrams per liter, and that the piper does look like it shows the trend of that upticking phase one that occurs. And so this is kind of the further workup and explanation of some of the processes that we do here internally at the agency when we look at this water quality data to try to make a call on where to where that seawater intrusion line, that 500 milligram goes when the software contours it. And with that, that's what I've got for you this afternoon for the update on the 2023 seawater intrusion to try to address some of the questions that were brought forward in January, February when we first brought these to y'all. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tamara. I got to say, the Piper diagram, the last two where you showed them with the maps against the contour lines, yeah, these, I really like that. It provides a lot of information and more context, so thank you on that. Board members, questions or comments on the presentation?
Yeah, Tamara, thank you very much, and I agree. I think that page is telling, and that was the thing that I think Director Schettini was pointing out too. It's like he's got a perfectly good well next to another one. I'm assuming it's some kind of a geological issue or aquitard or something is doing that, but that is actually, this is very illuminating. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Anyone else? Question over here.
Yeah.
Tamara, on page 14, the presentation, you had mentioned that the main body, there was no advancement in 2023. Any idea of why that might be?
We've had 2 really nice wet years. We probably didn't have to pump as much. This is all driven by groundwater elevation, pumping. I would also say that just because we don't have advancement to the threshold of 500 milligrams doesn't mean that there wasn't increasing chlorides. So you can still have chlorides increasing to any number below 500. And it would not show as advancement, but there would be increasing in chloride. So, for example, on this map, where you do see that in the 400 foot aquifer, there is no advancement in this main body regional lateral flow, the typical classic pathway. You do have other. This is the 250. These gray hashed lines here is where the 250 milligram per liter chloride line would form. And for example, you've got what I'm afraid to say is going to be another island that's forming. You've got a couple of wells in there. One well is at 283 milligrams per liter and was at 417. And then you've got these other islands out here and the chloride, kind of around it as well. I would say that we had great water years. We probably had a little less pumping in these, but that doesn't say that there was no increase in chloride values. It just means that there was no passing of the 500 milligram per liter threshold.
Got it. Great, appreciate that. And
and just one more thing, if I could add really quickly, I forgot. We did see advancement in the large islands. So in that. The vertical migration, these islands, there was that slight bit of advancement on this larger island, this larger southern island, but not in the regional body. You're correct.
Great. All right. Thank you. And I appreciate it because then it really gives us a look at what is happening and where it's trending, and it's science at its best. And appreciate the work you guys are doing on this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Board of Directors, any other comments or questions? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Bill Lipe, Monterey County resident. Thank you, Tamara, for the report. I think the level of detail is really nice to see, some of these anomalies that tend to happen or seem to happen and understanding that better. I believe some of this, a lot of your work is also, was somewhat utilized to help put together the seawater intrusion model that the GSA put together. I think the agency helped with that. And the more we know about this, the better, and hopefully we can fix it. And I just want to say, I think this is Tamara's last meeting. I believe she's retiring. And so I just want to thank her for her service. And it's not always an easy deal to be, amongst a lot of folks that have a lot of different opinions and are very passionate. But she's always done, I think, a really good job, not just with this, but also with the GEMS program, we're really fortunate to have all that data to help justify the things we're doing and hopefully we will do in the future. So thank you, Tamara. Bye.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that.
Any other members of the public could like to make a comment on this? Anyone online?
No hands raised.
Okay, hearing and seeing none. Bill, I do need to correct you because Tamara won't be leaving us. The motion will include for Tamara to bring back next year. So I don't know how she'll accomplish that. I'm back to the board now for action. It's just an update, yes.
It was just an update, Chair. No action needed.
Thank you.
If I could just say,
Absolutely.
I wanted to thank Tam so much for all of her work over the years and her detail and explanations that she shared with all of us and teaching us along the way. So best of luck in your retirement.
Thank you, Deidre. Yeah, I'm happy to bore anybody with chemistry anytime you want.
Yeah, anybody wants to see Tam, she'll be at our next BMP meeting on May 1st. And that'll be, we can do the final on that day.
Make sure you bring the donuts for that one. All right, we'll now move consent to calendar. Any member want to pull any items for discussion? Is there any member of the public who speak on any of the consent agenda items? Again, I'll ask any member of the public to speak on any consent agenda items. Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the board for action.
Make a motion to adopt the consent items.
Second.
First with John, second with Mark. All in favor? Aye. Against? All right. Now move on to item number 14. Consider recommending that the Monterey County Water Resource Agency Board of Supervisors approve and adopt the fiscal year 2024-25 assessment charges with the cost of living increase for flood zones 1, 1A, 8, 9, 12, and 17. Any members of the board have any comments or questions on this item? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the board for action.
Move to approve.
First with Mark.
We're going to let Nan talk a little bit.
We're going to go through these.
Oh, we are? Oh, okay.
And we already have a motion, so we have a second.
A second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Against? Passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And not to put you out, Nan, people are pretty understand what's going on these items. We'll move to item 15, which is approve and adopt fiscal year 2024-25 cost of living adjustments, increase of 2.4% of zones 2B, 2Y, and 2Z. Any members of the board have any questions or comments on this item? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item?
No hands raised.
Okay. Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the board for action.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
First with John, second with Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Passes unanimously. Item 16, consider recommending to approve and adopt fiscal year 24-25 assessment charges with cost of living increase COLA of 2.4% for Zone 2C. And set and hold a public hearing at 10:30 at May 29th for the Board of Directors. Any member of the board want to have any questions or comments on this item? Is there any member of the public who would speak on this item?
No hands raised.
Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the board for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
First with Mark, second with Matt. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. Item 17, consider recommending that the Monterey County Water Resource Agency Board of Supervisors approve the Monterey County Water Resource Agency fiscal year 24-25 budget. Nan?
So I can, mic is on. All right. So today's action is for you to consider recommending the Monterey County Water Resource Agency Board of Supervisors approve the Water Resource Agency's fiscal year 24-25 recommended budget. We had a Board of Directors had a budget workshop on March 18th, and also Finance Committee reviewed the recommended budget on April 5th. However, there was a budget is based on the recommended budget is based on the 8945 water delivery fees. However, the first side through the public hearing, and the board recommended that $45.24 of water delivery fee. So my presentation is based on, again, $89. So what I recommend is the numbers will change. But the good thing is the number here is the changes that's impacting by the water delivery fee reduced from $89.60 to $45.24. So what that is the impact. Those reductions will impact the Fund 131 and Fund 132, so the CSIP and SBIP. And then also, it only impacts for expenditures in Fund 131. So the expenditure in Fund 131 will reduce by $800,000 of what's been recommended. And also the revenue will decrease for the Fund 131 from what's recommended to the $500,000. And then for the Fund 132 from what's recommended to $387,000. So it will be, I'll go through the numbers with what's recommended at the 8960. However, if you can just keep in mind that the total expenditures will reduce by $800,000 and total revenue is reduced by $887,000. I get that? So again, the total appropriations, the recommended budget is $49,999,000. However, that will be even reduced further by $800,000. And the total revenue is $43 million. But again, that will be reduced even further by $887,000. And again, the CPI for the next year's, all the assessment charge is going to be at 2.4%. And the water delivery rate is recommended as 89.60. However, again, the next version of recommended going to the Board of Supervisors, and also the public hearing notice for the Board of Supervisors will be at $49.24. Going back to the impact to the fund balances, what's recommended is 6.5. However, it will be even further reduced. For the total agency impact to the fund balance will be using $6.6 million. So for the expenditures, again, total expenditures will be reduced by $800,000, but we are using the $6.6 million of fund balances to cover the funding gap. Then we have a total of 57 FTEs, and those are, we adding the 6 FTEs to right size for all the tasks and activities we are planning to do. However, those ones, the 4 positions are unfunded. We are adding the positions, but we are not able to fund the positions because we don't have sufficient revenues. And also the 6 positions we are planning to fund. However, there will be a timing, so we call the salary savings. So we're not going to hire for the full time. We want to see how much we have, kind of juggling, and to bring that position on board. So there will be the 6 position partially funded, create a salary savings. So therefore, total 51 positions either fully or partially funded for this year. Again, with using the $6.6 million of fund balances, our main focus is the ongoing operation and maintenance activities. We are limiting the major repairs and replacement projects. And the budget doesn't have much of a wiggle room in a way. So therefore, any projects, additional projects we have to do, any new grants we have to do that it's not included in the budget will require the budget amendment. Here is the proposed organization charts for the fiscal year 25. Those ones that it's a new are the positions either newly added or reclassed. And all those grades are still vacant. So the total, again, 57 positions and 51 positions are funded either partially and fully. Here is the recommended budget's expenditures. The amounts percentage will change because 800,000 reductions will hit this consultant cost. Consultant cost right here, that is going to be reduced. But pretty much salary and benefit is 18%. Monterey One Water is about 18%. Total consultants about 15%. The grant consultants or the contractors reimburse it's 18%. But again, by reduction of 800,000 will decrease the consultant percentage. Here is the just details of each category. So what's included in the budget? Again, salary and benefit is 8.7%. At the previous items, one public comment was that we are giving the employees a 10% increase, which is not correct. The salary and benefit increase of 5% overall compared to the last year. However, there is no increases incorporated in the budget. All the staff, we add more positions than the last year, that's for sure. But all the employee salary and benefit is depending on the MOUs we have for the employees. And those are the ex-unit manager units salary, the unions ending at, the MOU agreement ends at the December 31st. And then general employees end at June 2024. So they are currently being negotiated. Any increase that coming over there has to be observed the existing budget or budget amendment. Currently, it's not because we don't know what the percentage is going to be. All the benefits, insurance or the CARPers, those are incorporated in what's in there. However, any increase that union is going to negotiate is not included in the budget. So the 10% of salary increase is not incorporated, not at all. I don't know where they get. And CowCap, good news is CowCap reduced from 8.8 million to 500,000. Monterey One payments we also reduced from 9.56 million to 9.16 million. And other consultant costs are 6.1 million to 6.3 million. However, that reduction is going to be also by 800,000 reduced. So all the service and supplies, again, 5.9 to 3.6 in fiscal year 25 are here. And transferring out is, again, one of the things that I just want to highlight, because we already did the budget workshop. So the changes are that we did remove the fundings. I believe there was 350,000 at the budget workshop. We proposed that transfer from the hydro funds to the Interlake to continue the fundings, to pursue the continued funding for Interlake projects. We reduced those transfer, and we're planning to use whatever the fund balance left over at the Fund 426 to continue the funding Interlakes. So that item has been removed from the budget.
Say that one more time. So that is no longer part of the budget?
That's correct.
Move any money out of the hydro fund to the Interlake Tunnel?
That's correct. Debt payments of 4.4 million. We still have those three debts, the bond, SBWP bond payments, and also the two CCIP loans. So those are the 4.4 million total. I believe we still have 15 years to pay. And again, total expenditures, 49.56 million. I just want to stop here and see if you have any questions.
Board members, any questions? Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I just missed. So did the 350 grand from the generation get moved to?
So at the budget workshop, original baseline budget was that staff was planning to use 350,000 hydroelectric revenue to to fund the continued efforts to seeking the additional money or find the ways to continue with the Interlake Tunnel projects.
So it got moved as far as budget terms or actually moved?
Actually, the fund, so we're gonna use $350,000 of the fund hydroelectric revenue and then give it to the Interlake funds because we have two separate funds for those hydroelectric revenues, the Interlake Tunnel projects.
Okay.
And then continue with the whatever it's necessary to continue the Interlake Tunnel project. However, that plan was just canceled. We're gonna continue whatever we have to do at the Interlake projects using the Interlake fund balances, but we're gonna reserve, we're not gonna touch the hydroelectric revenue for the Interlake Tunnel project.
But did I catch the comment earlier that CSIP's supposed to get some of that money?
It have.
In the past.
In the past 20 years. Up to $200,000 a year.
But does it happen, or, I mean?
Well, it did, and then it sort of,
So we got money coming in, and then we do what we want with it whenever we think we need to do something with it?
well, it was
Or
set
it
up.
goes to the highest need, or I
Well,
don't
no, when
understand.
CSIP was developed, it was actually endorsed that part of that funding of the hydro plant would go to pay off CSIP bond, the bond that we have.
Okay, so I'm not confused.
No, safe to say, Marv, you're as confused as the rest of us. No more, no less.
But it just, we lost track of it.
Right, and so there's this history for at least a decade to not utilize hydro funds for CSIP, utilize them for other things. And so there's clearly some disconnect between recent practice and staff understanding of it and, decisions that were made literally 20 years ago. And so what we've decided is we do have funding in the Interlake Tunnel Fund to continue forward the water rights work that we're pursuing currently. So we'll rely on that until we can't. And that'll give us some time to sort through this, what was happening with hydrogen revenues and what should be happening. So we just decided leave it there and don't move it to CSIP and presume that's the right answer. Don't move it to Interlake Tunnel and presume that's the right answer. Just leave it there and we'll sort through it.
Clear as
Through the chair. But just to clarify, you're exactly right. We are not, we talk about this every year. The problem is we need to be clear about what we're saying. We can't be held, we're not going to be held to what somebody voted on this board 25 years ago. I don't think legally that's even allowed in the California Constitution, but we could come up with a policy and say we're following that. But a good question, that's a good catch, because actually I had forgotten about that, but that's, anyway.
Ken, I had a note. That was going to come up as soon as she finished. I was going to say, well, what about the Interlake Tunnel? No. That was...
All right, any more comments? All right, please continue, Nan.
So here is a couple of the highlight of projects, what's included in the fiscal year 25 budget. So we are adding the $854,000, the Salinas River Lagoon levee improvement, which is actually pending FEMA. It's a 2023 winter storm damage, but we are working with the FEMA to confirm that they will pay the mitigation portion of it. So it is at least put in the budget. If they approve it, then we're gonna do the estimate of $850,000 of Salinas River Lagoon levee improvement projects. But again, the FEMA's gonna pay. FEMA's not gonna pay 100%. We have to use the fund balances to complete the project. And we also have $450,000 Morro Core tie gate repair. We have an MOU with the Public Works. They're gonna reimburse us the 50% of our expense. But again, the remaining 50%, we're gonna use the fund balances to complete the project. CSIP cathodic protection repair, $250,000 still is in the budget. and also the 80,000 rate study is in there as well. And the 325,000 repairs in San Antonio, and 195,000 repairs in Nacimiento, and we also have a 200,000 low effect HCP and stream maintenance program in there. Here is what's changed after the budget workshop. The board recommended that we do need to do the Unit 2 repairs, so we added 320,000 consultant cost or contractor cost for the hydro plant Unit 2 repairs. Water, these ones are moot point because we're not gonna do this again, $45.24 of water delivery fees. We are not gonna pursue these additional work that is included in there. And also, after the budget workshop, there's additional expenses we had to add. It's a 230,000 Carmel River flood impact study, which is actually the money designated from the state's budget this year, fiscal year 23-24, and 100,000 wage studies, and 850,000 reduced the CAS aid for the hydro plant access road repairs. Those are the damage that happened again 2023 winter storm that we are asking. The project is already approved by FEMA, and they did give us the cost estimate of $1.1 million, and we are just asking the county general funds to give us the 850,000 cash aid, and then we're gonna use the unspent reserve, strategic reserves we got at the, early on when winter storm happened, the 7 million reserves we received. So whatever the remaining balance plus the 850,000 will be used to complete the repairs, and then county get the reimbursement when the FEMA pays 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, whatever. And also we add 100,000 regulatory fee rate study for the dam operation in Fund 116. 275,000 DWF flood inundation grant. That's the grant we just awarded, or at least they'll give us the notice of award. And that is some consultants plus the employees, and it's added into the recommended budget. For the total revenue is 43 million. Again, that will be reduced by 887,000 at the water delivery fee at $45.24. And it's for that's incorporating all those 2.4% the CPI increase and the water delivery fee at $45.24. And we definitely see the decrease the grant revenue estimate. Again, for the last 2 years that I've been here at the Water Resources Agency, we had a tendency over budgeting the grant revenues, overestimate for grant expenditures as well. So at the year end, we always get to, for the last 2 years that I remember, we are like 34% of what's been budgeted for the both expenditures or the revenue side. So for this year, this grant revenue is more of what's more practical and more achievable than what's total full amounts putting in the budget. So again, the total revenue, 43 million minus 887,000. So that this is the percent distributions. Assessment, we have a big spot. The assessment is the 41% of our revenue. Grant is 23%. Water delivery hydro fee is 8% because, again, that was for the higher rate, so we'll reduce by almost 20% or 50% on there. Ad valorem 8%, that transfer is 12%. Again, here is just the impact for the water delivery fee. I did mention the water delivery fee changes only impacts for the Fund 131 and Fund 132. So Fund 131 revenue, total revenue reduced by 500,000, and the Fund 132 recommended revenue will reduce by 387,000, and total revenue is 42.15 million. And here just the category, the details of the each category. Again, the ad valorem is 30.4 million, which will be increased by 12% from the last year. Special assessment is 13.53 million. It's a decrease from my minus 1 point. It's not because I'm just pointing out, it is because the last year I was overestimating our assessments, so that this is the more actual assessment from the what's collected applied to the CPI. And again, the total grant revenues are decreasing from the 18 million from the 9.87 million. 18 million includes the 6 million upfront payments. We have upfront payments of 6 million for the NASME grants, but we are not recognized that revenue. It's in the bank, but because we don't have that work associated with it. So as soon as the work is done, I'm gonna recognize those money. But anyway, so those 6 millions are not in here. So that's why the significant decrease for the grant of federal revenues in fiscal year 25. The water delivery fee, again, this is the 34% increase is at the recommended rate. So we're gonna reduce that by the 887,000. That will be bring it down to almost a similar level. And therefore, total revenues are from the last year's 50.1 million to, again, 42 million or so in fiscal year 25. Any questions? All right. So I do have, this is a reminder for the board. This is the unassigned balances, meaning the reserves that has no purpose, not no purpose. It's a general reserves that doesn't have any restrictions, so we can spend per your directions and Board of Supervisors. So estimate ending balances for the fiscal year 25 is about 13.7 million or so, minus 887,000. However, I also want to point it out to you, this is the assigned fund balances, meaning that we have this amount of money that set aside with the specific purposes. So we can only use this money for these specific purposes, or you will require the board actions for us to use this money. For example, that there is a cloud seating of 1.25,000 in there. So unless we will require your actions, your directions for us to use the money, throw that money down. I'll just quickly go through each funds. So the fund 111 is administration funds. The total revenue we estimate is we're budgeting is 5.27 million. Total expenditure is 8.96 million, using the fund balance of 1.67 million. That includes the SBB CSA subgrants and also some winter storm related repairs. Again, I did mention the Salinas River Lagoon levee repairs, and also the 447,000 fund transfer. The transfer is gonna happen to the Fund 122, the Rectich and also the Gonzales Sul. And we also, from the budget workshop, we added this 230,000 Carmel River flood study and also the 100,000 waste study. For the Fund 112 Pajaro levy, is the total revenue estimate is 1.04 million. Total expenditures also the 1.045 million, using the fund balance is 4.6. For the notable point is that we have our OMRRR agreement with the PERPMA is ending at December 31st, 2024. So if anything happens afterwards, there might be, we need to adjust the fund balances if we want to continue to do that. The Fund 116 is a dam operations. Total revenue is 12.98 million. Total expenditure is 15.88 million, using the fund balances 2.89 million. The activities included is, again, cement spillway, plentiful rock outcrop removals, and spillway chute panel 14R repairs. and the San Antonio spillways. We did add a $200,000 regulatory fee rate study and the public outreach and engagement and HBA updates after the budget workshop. Fund 131, solar that storm drain, total revenues $108,000, total expenditures $129,000, using the fund balance of $21,000. Fund 122, wreck ditch. Total revenue is $2.14 million, total expenditure is $1.97 million, and impact to the fund balances we are adding, hopefully, $72,000. Again, this includes the $244,000 transfer from the Fund 111, which is admin funds using the not the county's strategic reserves for the 2023 winter storm reserves. San Lorenzo Creek, I think I misspoke. The San Lorenzo Creek, the total revenue is $246,000. Total expenditures $254,000, using fund balance over $7,671. Again, this is the Fund 111 transfer for related to the 2023 winter storm related damages. Again, those $200,000 is from the strategic reserves, the county advance payments we got for the 2023 winter storm repair. Fund 127, Moro Kojo, total revenue $322,000, total expenditures $582,000, impact to the fund balance is $260,000. Again, this is because of the $425,000 the Moro Kojo tide gate repair that only 50% reimbursed by the Public Works, but the fund balance will have to pay for it, the remaining balances. The Fund 130 hydro plant operations, total revenue is $1.17 million. Hopefully that the water level stays as is, and they will continue to generate the hydroelectric revenue. And the total expenditure is $1.1 million, and adding to the fund balance of $37,000. As you see, I struck out the $350,000 transferred to the Interlake Tunnel after the, we're not going to do that. But we added $320,000 of expenditures for the Unit 2 repair. Fund here is the Fund 131 CSIP. Again, the budget you are considering to adopt or recommend to the Board of Supervisors is the water delivery fee at the $45.24. That includes the total expenditure of $7.13 million and total revenue of $6.16 million, using the fund balance of $970,000 that keep bringing it down to the fund balance of $1.9 million. Again, $45.24, that whatever the baseline is still remaining same. So the repairs that's in there, and also the I forgot. Fund 132 SBRP, again, your consideration is for $45.24 water delivery fee, and that is a total expenditure of $6.19 million and total revenue of $5.73 million, using the fund balance of $467,000, that brings it down to the fund balance of $851,000. Fund 134 SRDF operations, the total revenue is $3.6 million, total expenditure of $30.7, using the fund balance of 131. The Fund 134, something that I read to make clear is that there is some damage done during the 2023 winter storm event. However, we don't have exact estimate of how much it's going to be cost to repair it. So the repair estimate that I've seen is about $1 million or so, but we don't know exactly how much it's going to be. And we also need to figure out whether that it's a FEMA's going to pay us or not. So whatever once that is clear, then I think this is the one that we probably need to do the budget amendment and also figure out if the FEMA doesn't pay, how we're gonna pay for it and all that. So this is Fund 303 and 313 is 303 is a CCIP loan. 313 is the SBBP bond. This is just the money transfer from the our agency funds, and then money transfer in and then goes out to pay to the bank or whatever the loaners they have. Fund 426 Interlake Tunnel projects. The grant ends fiscal year 2023-24 this year. However, we may have some activities continue for the Interlake Tunnel projects. So the total revenue, because the grant ends, there is no additional revenue coming in. So the total revenue is just the interest that collects on the remaining fund balances, and we are estimating 3% or 3.5%. So the total revenue is $38,000, and the expenditure is that we might continue to seek the alternative funding source for the Interlake projects. But instead of getting the money from the hydro revenue, we're gonna use the fund balances, and then, so therefore impact to the fund balance is $336,000. That brings it down to the fund balance of $325,000. So that's the end of my presentations. So we did adopt, the board of directors approved the water delivery fees. So then we will notice the public hearing for the Board of Supervisors with the oldest rates, CPI plus the $45.24 for the water delivery fee, and the budget hearing on the May 29th and May 30th, and then budget adoptions by the Board of Supervisors will be June 20th. This is the end of my presentations. Again, for you, today's action is consider recommending the Water Agency's Board of Supervisors to approve the agency's fiscal year 25, the recommended budget.
Thank you, Nan. Appreciate the presentation and really appreciate constantly making sure that the public understood that the $45.24 rate was going to be reflected in the final version that goes to the Board of Supervisors, and any adjustments in the numbers will be changed too. So thank you for that as well. Board of Directors, any questions or comments? Mike?
One of the comments that I just kept on bouncing up to me was consultants. Consultants.
Same here.
And consultants for things that I'm just going, what are we consulting about? What do we have consultants for on some of these drain areas?
So that's what
the flood districts. I don't. What work is being done in these areas to require a $200,000 annual consulting fee or a $400,000?
That's, Mike, I'm sorry to interject, but I was going to bring this up as part of our conversation because Ara had mentioned consultant is a catch-all word they're using. It's really contractors, so we're going to need to make sure that the line that says consultant is a consultant, because he showed us under the consultant, it was all the contractors. Yeah. So it's a damn semantic thing where I think it's probably just an accounting thing where they just line everything under this.
Yeah, because a backhoe, in my opinion, is not a consultant.
No, it's not. And I'm thank you, Ara, for bringing that up, and thank you, Mike, because those are the little things that cause confusion. And and when you see $8 million for consultants, like on that one fund, was it 131? Yeah. It's like, what the hell? So you understand, right, how we can start breaking those down between actual consultants and contractors? Thank you for bringing that up, Mike. Mark?
One thing I got to congratulate you on is the ability you've had to be able to understand all these terms and acronyms and everything. It's impressive, Nan. But a question here also is on the Fund 426 Interlake Tunnel. Do you think we're going to consume all of that money before the grant? And that may be a manager question. I'm just.
The fund balances or the grant amounts?
I guess the grant itself is to use all of the grant money that we had.
So the total grant amount is 10 million, and we are counting every penny is what we are spending right now. And however, I think there might be some money that we are not able to spend, but it is the last time that I estimate is about, we are probably come about to 9.56 million, that range. So for those that we don't have expenses for, that we probably have to return.
Alrighty, so I guess that's not too bad, for as many hurdles as this project has had, to have accomplished as much as we've had. We had one guy that passed away midway in this project, that was managing it. So, yeah, I appreciate that.
We are doing, so at least the one thing that I can say is we're seeing any related activities or any project that might have a relationship. HBA is one thing that we've done using these grants and do the updates. And so we go through all the activities we need to do and then try to link to the grant and then also make the justification and build to the grant as much as we can.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Is there any member of the public who could speak on this item?
Nancy Isaacson.
Yes, Nancy.
Thank you. Nancy Isaacson for Slains Valley Water Coalition. I'd like to thank staff for a job well done all the way around today on the budget items. Much appreciated. And really like to thank you for being responsive to the comments regarding the 350 being used from the hydro funds to be used for the Interlake Tunnel. And just to clarify, I'm not an attorney, but I talk about decisions made 20 years ago and not being held to them, but you do need to be held to them because it was a resolution that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors as to how the funds would be utilized. And so unless and until they've changed them, you do need to adhere to them. So I do appreciate staff saying that they are looking into that. The 350, 200 of that should have gone to CSIP. The rest should go to the reservoir capital asset management plan. And going back, if funds were utilized otherwise than what they were collected for, they should be returned. As you all said, CSIP's in dire need of monies, and we all need to be we need to be cognizant of what happened in the past, lessons learned, and going forward. And I and the coalition really appreciate staff's willingness to look at all of these things. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Any other members of the public?
No hands raised.
All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the board for action.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
I'll second it.
First with John, second with Ken. All in favor? Aye. Against? Passes unanimously. Move on to item 18, consider authorizing the general manager to engage with a coalition of Western irrigated agricultural interests. Ara?
Yeah, thank you, Chair LeVar. So this is, I understand, maybe something a little bit new. I had raised this question several board meetings ago about, if the agency were to engage in issues, how should we go about talking about that, how we engage and so forth. When we were going through the bylaws revision here recently, one of the things that jumped out at me was with respect to the Personnel and Administration Committee, it says, and Governmental Affairs or something to that effect. So I had a conversation with Chair Gonzalez and we decided, well, let's give this, let's try this in terms of the pathway, to have these conversations. And so we first introduced this at the last Personnel and Administration Committee hearing, and that's how it came before you all here today. So this is our experiment. These issues can move quite quickly sometimes, and they don't necessarily line up with board meeting cadence. And so one of the reasons that the request here is just to be able to engage with the coalition as its work changes over time. I would still, you're still comfortable with me working with them in terms of expressing compliments or concerns, whatever the case may be. The specific issue in front of us has to do with a rulemaking process that the United States Army Corps of Engineers is currently engaged in. The proposed rule changes affects what are called principles, requirements, and guidelines. These were first established by Congress in the 2007 Water Resources Development Act, or commonly referred to as WRDA. WRDA is periodically updated, and it's going through its update process now. One of the concerns that has been raised today is that it was the sense of folks in 2007, when WRDA was then being considered, that these new rules would apply to future projects and not necessarily be retroactive or backwards looking. In 2014, the Obama administration issued its interagency guidelines, and in it stated that PRNGs would specifically apply to operational modifications, modernization of existing facilities, dam safety modifications, which is square in our house, culvert replacements, conveyance, fish ladder modifications, and so forth. And so they very much took the position at that time in 2014 that these new rules would in fact apply to existing projects. And so that turn happened some while ago, and then now the Biden administration is looking to expand the rulemaking process, or rather the decision-making process, to include the prioritization of environmental justice programs, accounting for ecosystem services, requiring new economic analyses, and then having this preference for non-structural alternatives or approaches. And so those are the general concerns about the proposed rule, and in particular the ambiguity around these sort of criteria and the necessary subjectiveness that goes into quantifying them, and when you can't quantify them, qualifying them. The concern being that, this may be disruptive for existing projects, but certainly adds entirely new layers of burden in terms of preparing the analyses and cost and risk, and of course time, and time is cost. And so those are the main things. So at this point, there is a West-wide coalition of irrigated agricultural interests. They've been working on this. Family Farm Alliance has been on the lead. The Association of California Water Agencies, through their, what we call Aqua East, through their federal arm, is also working on this. Expects to be signing on to this letter as well. Expressing these concerns and offering up suggestions about how the proposed rules could be clearer through implementation of examples to be able to better define, the path forward as we go through what is already an extraordinarily complex federal decision-making process. So what I'm looking for here today is the ability to sign on to this letter and potentially others going forward in the future, and just to continue to lend the voice of the Water Resources Agency to this broader coalition, because the way these rules get incorporated into the Army Corps' processes will certainly have an effect on the costs that we incur as we move forward with various projects, their complexity, and frankly the litigation risks that come from all of that. So that's my summary.
Thank you, Ara. Board members, yes, Ken?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ara, for bringing this to the board, and I appreciate it, and I support it, because I think what this does is, this literally gets us to the table, and that's where we've missed out in the past. So having our voice heard, this is what you're proposing is going to allow this our region and certainly this agency a place at the table. Thank you.
Other board members? Yeah, Deidre?
Yeah, I agree, and I commend you for working on the national and the state level for all that you do. It is important that Monterey County gets basically put on the map. And not only do we understand what's going on at the level, but being able to give input to shape what happens. And just being connected overall leads to just more opportunities for the agency overall. So thank you.
And I support it, and I appreciate the forward thinking on this. You had mentioned something about the time is of the essence on some of this activity. Maybe in the future, if there's, I know there was a little discussion at the P&A meeting on how to try to slim that down somehow. Was there another, and I'm in a lapse of memory here on some way that if we end up in a position how we could shrink it down instead of coming here directly first?
Yeah, and so what we had talked about, just thinking through different ways that we might be able to address, these pop-ups when they happen. And so the way I left the Personnel and Administration Committee meeting was with the notion of preparing a few different types of recommendations, from a process perspective, what makes sense, In some institutions, I would perhaps check with the chair and the vice chair, and then we would ratify. And others, we could have a quick ad hoc committee that's able to get together. So we'll work on some recommendations as far as those big, those other issues where they just do pop up.
I think the other issue that came up at the P&A meeting was the role of the board of supervisors on these issues and how they interact.
Right, and clarifying that, certainly.
Any other board members? I agree with what all my board members have said. It is better to be at the table. One thing I have found is you get more work done when you're trying to be part of the solution instead of coming out afterwards and just complaining about that's wrong. And you get nowhere then. And I don't want to see this agency in that position that we have to complain afterwards. So thank you for doing that. And yeah, look forward to some processes in case we have to move quickly, whether it be approval at the P&A committee, if it's going to need something done before the next board meeting, I think that's appropriate. And then just informing the board afterward that we had to move quickly. And if it's not going to meet the committee or board deadline and needs to be done sooner, that I would hope that the board would consider that the chair and vice chair could act as that ad hoc committee for approval if we have to move quick. I think those would be two great options. Otherwise, normally bring to P&A for a recommendation for the board's approval. If the timeline works that way, that would be ideal. Is there any member of the public who speak on this item?
No hands raised.
All right. I'll bring this back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve staff's recommendation with your clarifications on how to participate.
Second on that.
First with Ken, second with Matt. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Passes unanimously. All right, item 19, we have our April, May, and June calendars. Was there any corrections or comments on any of those? All right, we'll move to our general manager's report.
Super. So I'll start with the GEMS expansion. So over the past couple of meetings, we've talked a lot about what expansion means. We've talked about the role of the resources agency going forward. and the support for us assuming that role as monitor in chief, if you will, for those in the county. And so the work that we've been able to do in the time since has been sort of further vetting the concept about how these different pieces fit together. With respect to the ordinance approach itself, we're still leaning towards a repeal the existing ordinances and adopt a new ordinance kind of approach, with that new ordinance being more general than what the old ordinances are and really focused on the authority of the agency to perform this work, affirming, what is granted under the Agency Act, requiring the registration of wells in existing spaces that is different than what's been done in the past, as well as in the new spaces, requiring the reporting of information based upon the kind of information that requesting entities, those who are coming to us to ask for this service, might request. So in this case, what would the Salinas Valley Basin GSA want from us or want us to do? And then lastly, implementing the, the regulatory fee to support what is, quite clearly a regulatory program. So that's the basic architecture that we're talking about in terms of a new ordinance. And at this point, I'm optimistic that we will have a draft before you at the next meeting. And that's where we're at. That second level of documentation, I think, is probably the one that stakeholders are going to be most interested in, because that's going to be where I imagine the conversation about how are meters measured and on what frequency and at what quantities, and what will the data be used for and how is it aggregated, and all of that level of detail will exist there. And it exists there because it could be that the Salinas Valley Basin wants something different than potentially, say, the Department of Health if they want to come to us for service, or Marina Coast Water District if they want to come to us for service, whatever. So we want to leave that flexibility to the requesting entity in terms of what their particular needs are. And then that third tier of agreement, I think I imagine it to be very sort of straightforward. I mean, it's essentially a service agreement where we're agreeing to do work under these terms and conditions, and probably a task order sort of approach where, on an annual basis, that work and those rates are being updated, right? So that's the three sort of tiers that we're imagining right now in terms of advancing and implementing this program. Time is short. We have had discussions with the SVB in terms of, when do we begin outreach? I really think we need to have that sort of that middle slice, enough there to be able to talk about what it is, because I think that will be the one where there's most interest. And so, we have staff working to sort of fill that piece out. So there has been progress made. It just may not look like it.
Just quickly, I want to ask so I like the flexibility for the different types of data sets and what you can possibly get. My only thing is for consideration is the more personalized, more individualized that data becomes, that there should be a cost reflective of that, right? A more generic, more regional, without that individual assignment, that person's name on it or that person's well number that can be identified to a single individual. I just think should be a premium.
Yeah, and
I don't know how we do that, but it is more valuable data when it's that specific. So that's just an observation.
Yeah, and I don't know how we value that either. So part of what we've begun is looking for, sorry, Director Scatini, a consultant to help us.
A real consultant.
A real consultant to help us with the rate study. And so we've got some recommendations, and we're starting to, do those interviews now.
That was it.
Yep. That's it on GEMS. Personnel update. It's been, three bits of good news and one bit of sad news, which Mr. Leip had already reported on, but we did have a competitive recruitment for our water resources engineer, and I'm happy to say that one of our internal candidates competed for that position, so effectively a promotion for Guillermo Alvarez, and so that's great news, and he's settling into his new responsibilities well. He's working for, largely with Mark Foxworthy and on Nacimiento, of course, other duties as assigned. And then on the San Antonio side, we had a successful recruitment for a water resources engineer. She starts today, so that's very exciting. She's probably somewhere in the bowels of this building filling out Form 5762. But we're excited to have her on board. Her name is Unati Desai. Also starting today under water resources hydrologist is Ricardo Carmona. So we have two in the 22nd. Oh, next week. I'm so excited. I got a week ahead of myself. But thank you, Giselle. And so he'll be starting next week, and we have two coming into the hydrology piece, in part, bulking up to do the extra work that we'll be doing under the GEMS expansion. And then, lastly, Tam has decided that she wants to do other, I'm sure, funner and interesting things. So her last date with us will be May 3rd. And so Giselle and others are working on events to be able to honor Tam on her way out, and so sad and happy at the same time there. And not too far after that, we'll begin looking to fill her seat. Well, we won't replace her, but we can fill the seat. So that's my staffing update. On Monterey One reconciliation, really only two things to update there quickly. One is with these breaks in the weather. We've been working to get E2 out to work on these remote measuring units or monitoring units. We want to ensure that those are well calibrated before we get into the heart of the new irrigation season so that we're able to capture that data and really help inform that hydrodynamic model and future decisions around optimization. And with respect to the financial audit that's underway, we're looking towards the end of this month to be the pens down kind of moment. The auditors will finalize their work, and I anticipate a draft report somewhere in the mid to late May timeframe, depending on when that work can be finalized. Dam safety project funding, we have begun interviewing consultants to help us with the regulatory rate fee development. And so that is something that, we're looking forward to. It's, one of the items that Nan had covered is being in our budget proposal. And so, looking to get that work underway within, hopefully a couple of months. And then under the Aqua update, not much there to say. I'd already talked about their intention at this point to sign on to the Army Corps letter. They also have their spring conference coming up the first week of May. Right now, my intention is to attend. I believe a few others from staff, and I think Director Bailey is our representative on the Ag Committee, do intend to attend as well. And so we'll have more to say next month.
All right, any questions or comments?
Just one, the HBA, that's going okay, no snags?
Yeah, and so it's, right now it's sitting, the HBA has two pieces to it, right? So there's the hydraulic modeling piece that is, where does the water go? And then there's the economic analysis piece. The hydraulic modeling piece is further ahead. And so that group is actually, sort of an idle right now. The economist work is proceeding. We expect their work really any time now. There has been a draft circulating for internal review, but we're still on track to have that wrapped up, by the end of June, along with the draft And so, yeah, it's proceeding.
Any other questions or comments? All right, committee reports. ResOps, looks like we had a cancellation in March, but a special one in April. Or was that canceled as well?
We had it.
Nothing? Okay.
Yeah.
Basin management. Planning.
Yeah, we have been meeting, but I'll say the biggest change is really the topics that we're discussing that with Shauna and Ara have really looked at the bylaws and saw what planning really means, and it's about planning for the future. And so we're seeing more projects that are on the horizon and status of those projects, which is really nice because this is something, I think this is one of the motivating factors in having a strategic plan is to understand where we're going, not what are we currently doing now, which is important, but what is planned in the future. So I think we're starting to see more of that, and so I'm happy to report on that.
Awesome.
Regarding ResOps, we approved the release schedule that's in the packet here. So that was our main task. That's why we moved the meeting for that.
Personnel and administration.
The general manager went over it in his report.
And then finance. I know John's gone, but.
The budget stuff we did today.
All right. That makes that quick. We have our reservoir storage and release update in our packets. Any board of director comments? Yes, Ken? Or Mike? Start with Mike and then Ken.
Yeah, I just want to thank Tam on her years of service and congratulations on your retirement and whatever endeavor you're going to do next. So thank you for that. And then secondly, back to the CSIP issue, I know this wasn't the money that staff wanted, but I think that we made a big step in presenting to the stakeholders at least that there are some big dollar amounts, some big ticket items that are going to be needed to be funded moving forward. And I think with that, we'll get much better buy-in down the road on this. So thank you for that. And again, thank you, Tamara.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thank Tamara. She's been a real rock for really did a fabulous job with bringing forward the water quality issues and making them understandable. And I kind of had to laugh today. That map of her seawater intrusion contours is just perfect. And of course, luck will have it that, okay, she's off to do something else. So wish her well. On a more serious note, I'd draw your attention to in the closed session, one of the items that is there, and I'm certainly not going to talk about anything that was discussed in closed session, but one of them is Caliam versus the Marina Coast, Caliam et al. And so this was a stain on the reputation of our agency, but really specifically this board, the board of directors. And what I would like, would I like to ask staff, because I believe that the state's conflict of interest laws dealing with public officials really costs our taxpayers and our assessees money, because we couldn't get remedies that I think we deserved, and certainly going on for 8 or 9, over a decade now, for Pete's sake. I think I'm the only person on this board of directors that was there when this happened. Is inexcusable that we have such weak laws protecting the taxpayers from public officials being involved in a conflict of interest, and specifically the time that the matter has to be brought up, I think, is the worst of it. And so what I'd like is if staff could look into and confer with county council, et cetera, and maybe come back and we can put an input into the ledge committee's future priorities to ask our state legislature to protect the taxpayers better than the existing law, because it's a disgrace. And Anyway, I'll leave it at that, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Ken. Nothing for you, Gija?
Yeah, last Friday, I attended the Salinas Valley Basin GSA first public workshop. I think there's 4 more workshops to go. It was very well done. I think what we talk many times about, do we need a consultant or how do we do outreach, but it really comes down to messaging and what that public message is. And why it's worth the board members attending is to listen to how they have crafted the message and taking very complex information and sharing it with the public, and then the activity at the end to try to get that message across. And so for that alone, it's really worth attending. So I just wanted to encourage other board members to sign up for a workshop if they can.
Nothing for you?
I too will pass on congratulations to Tam, and hopefully she'll be at the BMAC meeting on the 1st, and we can thank her again there. And I'm attending the Friday session, so hopefully I'll learn something like Deidre did. So thank you.
Same here, Tam. I want to wish you a great retirement. I don't know if this will be your last contour map you present or make. But if it is, so be it. And I wish you many days of good health and a long, long retirement. Thank you.
Tam, same thing. You've been here as long as I have, well, actually longer, but you're the first one that introduced me to sea water intrusion contour maps. And it was confusing at the beginning. And I agree, Ken. I love this last one. I thought it just perfect. So thank you so much. All right, that concludes our meeting. We'll adjourn at 3:56 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.